Frg Ministry presents the Catholic Influencers podcast. Join me, Alyssa and my co-hosts,
Father Rob Galea
and Justine Combo,
as we break open the upcoming Sunday Mass readings and discuss relevant topics and life issues from a Catholic perspective. For a shorter, more reflective explanation of the Sunday Mass readings, be sure to check out our sister podcast, Catholic Influencers, Father Rob Galea Homilies. Welcome to the final episode of Season 7.
Insert fireworks here.
Yes, sad and also blessed. You know,
Blessed.
I've learnt a lot. I must admit that this series, one of the best, absolutely, but it is really hard not doing the gospel.
Yeah.
Like having to focus on the second reading has been, like on the first reading or second reading, has been certainly a big challenge for me. Because there's no continuity like there is with the gospel, you know, like continues, goes from the book of Revelations to Corinthians and things like that. So,
But I must admit, I love how it's kind of connected to that weekly gospel.
Yeah.
Because when you get to Mass and you hear it all in context, it's like, oh, I get those connections.
Yes.
And that's,
I'm just glad we survived the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
That one episode where I literally said nothing. It was wonderful.
And Justine's back. Your voice is here. It's so good to have you back this
Spicy
week.
cough has passed. So
Excellent.
I made it out alive.
well, it's good to have you all here. And this is, although it is our final episode, it is certainly not our final episode in a sense. It's the final episode of the season, but we will have another season with wonderful surprises and some wonderful news, which we'll share with you a little bit later for those of you who stay tuned. But the purpose of this podcast is always to help people encounter the Mass so that you can go to Mass and know more than the priest. Dun, dun. Well, I bet you a lot of people would go to Mass having prepared, in a sense, a lot. Because we put in, like, if I put in an hour or 2 hours for preparation, and you do too, we have like 6 hours of preparations in 40 minutes.
But it's amazing that I can still turn up to Sunday Mass and be like, oh, this sounds familiar.
Where did I hear that before?
I think I've heard this. The human experience is quite unique and special.
But it's the feast this week, the feast of Corpus Christi.
Oh, my favourite of the whole year.
Can I just share a story of Corpus
Yes.
Christi? I can't tell. I know it's
Okay.
probably inappropriate.
Wow.
But this is a big feast in Malta. Like huge, where like everything shuts down, like the streets shut down, and each parish has this huge procession with the Blessed Sacrament, and people bring out the animals and they bring out their even their furniture, everything to bless. They just want Jesus to bless things. And apparently there was this procession in one particular village, and they were going through this village, and all of a sudden the police that were escorting the Blessed Sacrament stopped, and they all of a sudden were knocking at this woman's house. And so apparently her son went on holiday and said, "Mom, can you please look after my plants, water my plants, whatever, when I go?" And what happened was, Josh is still confused. I think you girls have figured it out. What happened was that when he went, this woman brought out the plants for Jesus to bless them, but they were marijuana plants.
Oh, my gosh.
Which
God
were
bless
illegal
her
in Malta. But yeah, exactly, she just wanted Jesus to bless her son's plants. But anyway, so I don't know, that's why, but it's amazing.
Now I'm going to be thinking of that at the feast. Thank you for ruining it. No, it's all good.
But anyway, that Jesus blesses all plants. But a question for you, even as we begin. Here's a question just for your interest. What is the worst gift you ever received? A birthday gift, Christmas gift, or something.
Dear my family and friends, I love you all. Sorry about this. Amen. Bye. I would say it's so cringy. The worst gift I've ever received was from my ex-boyfriend on Valentine's Day. He got his mum to make me this like collage gift, like with our photos in it. And I was just like,
Oh, no.
Your mum made this.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
I was going to say, that's a gift that I would probably put together for
Oh my gosh.
someone.
I
but-
honestly contemplated breaking up. I just had this dilemma. I was talking to my best friend. I was like, his mom made it. I don't know if I can do this.
Because that
Anyway.
means, what else is his mom going to make in the future, you know? Like,
There's a reason why it's in the past.
Oh, wow.
How about you, Alyssa?
Well, as he was talking about the marijuana plant story, no,
Oh,
it's not
okay.
marijuana, but
Okay.
the colour green, something came to my mind. I think my 18th birthday, someone gave me this green handbag, but it was ugly. Like,
Oh no.
Really ugly. And I can say this because this person's not going to be listening to the podcast. I haven't spoken to them since high school.
But if you are, hello, we love you.
But it was this ugly green handbag that, yeah,
Yeah.
You can give
well-
it to my mum.
pretty much to the bin.
She would
Sorry.
love to re-gift that.
Well, I think the worst gifts I always disappointing is like when an auntie or something comes with this box and you know it's like a Ferrero Rocher or a box of chocolates. Like, why bother wrapping it? There's nothing worse feeling than knowing like you're unwrapping a box of roses or Ferrero Rocher. But I had an auntie who always gave me that. But one day, it was a nice surprise. Like, it wasn't Ferrero Rocher, but it was one of those Dove soaps.
Oh.
But singularly wrapped. You know, usually you get 3 in a box at least. But she gave me one
She opened the 3-pack and distributed
for
them
each of the
Love
of the nieces and
Justine, we'll have to wrap up some chocolates at the end of the season and give them to you.
nephews. Yes.
You can do an
Well,
unboxing.
if I can guess what they are, they probably will stay wrapped for a regift.
I love it.
Anyway, okay, so let's hear from our sponsors.
This production would not be possible without the support of our FRG Ministry partners and donors. Your ongoing support ensures that our online masses, online courses, podcasts, TV programs, school, youth and parish outreaches continue to reach millions of people across the world. Please prayerfully consider giving a one-off donation or becoming an ongoing ministry partner and join us in our mission to share the love of Jesus and his message of hope to the ends of the earth. Find out more at frgministry.com/donate.
So this week's second reading is from the first book of Corinthians. It's chapter 11, verses 23 to 26. For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this, whenever you drink it, in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes."
We hear those words every Sunday, every day, every Eucharist. We hear that this is actually what the priest is repeating these words, which are also a repetition of the red letter words of Jesus, and the words he himself said at the Last Supper. So a very powerful quote, a very powerful and full of theology, these words. And you mentioned at the beginning the Mass, we talk about the Mass course as well, the course we have, and each one of these pieces is explained. It's just so full, so full of meaning.
Yeah, but I guess why is Paul bringing these words into this passage, into this letter to the Corinthians? It's because there's some liturgical problems kind of happening in the community of the Corinthians. So they were regularly celebrating kind of like a potluck supper or like a love feast along with the Eucharist.
So this, because I didn't know what potluck was until you mentioned it.
I wouldn't even
It's a
call it
BYO. Bring a plate.
Bring
with
a
food
plate.
on it, not
Yeah,
just
but
the plate.
I'm be interested to know if like Americans, you know what potluck is, or maybe you invented it. I don't know. The
didn't
Americans,
invent
not
that
you
word.
know, the Americans
No.
invented
Oh, okay.
it. So wondering. Yeah.
No, I feel like it is an American term because I see it on social media.
Okay, so
But
potluck.
I wouldn't call it a potluck. I would just call it a...
BYO, bring a plate.
We digress.
Sorry. So the Eucharist used to be like they
Yeah,
used to
so
bring
the
this.
Corinthians were kind of turning it into this big thing and they were completely missing the point. So what Paul was doing in this passage is reminding them that, hey, this celebration of the Eucharist was instituted by Jesus himself. And when we're treating it like this, we're actually doing a dishonor to God.
So it's become like a plain sort of the there are two parts of the Eucharist. There's the horizontal, which is the fellowship, and then there's the transcendent. Okay, so they're going up to heaven. So and sort of they've missed out that whole point, and it just became about this fellowship.
Yeah.
And how they got it so wrong, I think, is because at the time, and this is something I learned, obviously the churches didn't exist early on. So, church happened in homes, and obviously poor didn't have homes. It was the rich who had homes. And I suppose anytime that you put something supernatural in the hands of man, we have this real bad habit of making it human
Yes.
and ruining it. sometimes. So we go down a slippery slope of the human experience that sort of at times steps us further and further away from a supernatural reality. I think that's what they were doing. So if it was being hosted, this Eucharistic celebration hosted in the homes of the rich, which meant that the poor didn't always have access to it, or they'd indulge in the food before the poor got there. And so then it caused this division within the Eucharist, which is communion, which is Jesus died for all.
For communion, exactly. For unity, and it was bringing this unity. And so and then St. Paul coming and saying, hey guys, hold on. You're missing the whole point here. You're getting it wrong. Come back to the red letters.
Yes.
Come back to that experience of an encounter of Jesus feeding us. It's not about a club of the blessed.
Yeah, yeah. And we actually the whole kind of smackdown that's coming from Paul takes place in verses 17 to 22. So, we only hear this sort of reiteration of the words that Jesus spoke. But if you just rewind a little bit and read contextually the few verses beforehand, you'll read that basically Paul is saying, what have you done? You've completely lost the plot. You've completely abused what was instituted by Christ. Pull your head in.
And he's bringing him back to what was happening that night when Jesus did institute the Eucharist.
Sorry, the dog is playing with a soft toy and it's so noisy. I don't know if you're hearing all the noises, but there are noises and smells coming from it at the moment.
It's not
We're
me
blessed.
or Alyssa, that's for sure.
Sorry,
back to theology. Thank you very much. So when he's saying, do this in remembrance of me, basically what Jesus is saying here is that the Jewish Passover has now become the Christian Passover. So if we head back to the Old Testament, I love my Old Testament connections. The book of Deuteronomy speaks about how the Passover meal is an important remembrance of the day that the Israelites left Egypt. So in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 16, it says that you may remember as long as you live the day you left the land of Egypt. And so what Paul's insisting here is that the continuation of Jesus' sacrificial meal, which was intended by Jesus himself, just like the Passover was celebrated to remember the saving events that happened in Egypt. But now we're remembering Jesus himself. So while the Jews' memorial represents the mystery of deliverance out of Egypt, the celebration of the Eucharist now represents this Christian exodus. So it's kind of exciting. I love all this stuff.
Amazing.
That's great.
So we come to this place now where the sacrifice, Jesus becomes a sacrifice. So again, even to come back to the point of serving the poor, this is what it is. And the sacrifice was for poverty. It was for the stripping of self to be able to embrace the cross. And eventually, I think the church did recognize this. I think we've lost it a bit. One of the things that used to happen during Mass, at every Mass, was the offertory. Now, the offertory is very dignified now. We bring up a paten that is made of gold and some glass cruets, and we process up with this beautiful stuff. But it wasn't so. Before, the offertory was chickens and zucchinis and pumpkins and broccoli, and they would bring it from their farm, then tobacco, and they'd bring it from their farm, and they would take it and they'd walk up and give it to the priest. And eventually, that's why we have the sort of the ritual of washing of the hands of the priest. But what would happen is the priest would take this chook that is still alive, this chicken that's still alive, he'd hand it to the deacons. What would the deacons do? The deacons would immediately take the food and go out to the poor. Go straight to the poor to give it to the poor. Now, some was kept for the presbytery, some was kept, I know, but the rest was given out to the poor. So the deacons wouldn't even stay for that Mass. They'd go out straight to the poor because they were being Eucharist while we were receiving the Eucharist.
Wow. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So this is one of the calls as well that St. Paul was saying, hey, this is where we should come. So there seemed to be a response to what Paul is saying in the praxis of the church. Eventually that became less practical. It became less possible. And so we have collections instead. And we give to the poor that way, because it's difficult to give away a live chicken maybe to your next door neighbor, to someone who's on the street. Yeah.
It's going to take me a while to unsee the next offertory at Mass. Like I'm just going to see chickens in my brain. But
people would but they wouldn't only bring their food, they'd bring their first fruit, the First fruit. So the best asparagus, the best pumpkin, the nicest looking chicken, the sort of a calf that was the best. Now, not all things were processed in. Like if you're going to give, I suppose, a cow or something, you're not going to bring that in. But there were people would give their first fruit, the best of what they had, the best produce.
Isn't that incredible? Like if that is a metaphor for what happens in our heart.
Yeah.
What could / I might use the word should be happening in our heart. Like bringing our first fruits to God in Mass, like bringing the best that we can, which isn't perfect, doesn't have to be expensive, but just bringing the best of our heart, our willingness, our desire, even though we may have failed. Like in that moment, I think that's just an exceptionally beautiful image of a disposition of heart and our heart's attention at that point in Mass.
And I think this is one of the opportunities the church gives us is not only the offertory, but the collection. Now, many people see this as the church asking for money. The church, it's not the church cannot run. Most churches anyway cannot run with what is given in the basket. But it's sometimes we give what is overflow, what we have left over in our pockets, when it should hurt. It should be the first fruit. It should be our first paycheck in a sense. It should be our first something that hurts, that costs us something, just as much as that chicken costs someone something, that cow costs someone something, that asparagus, that pumpkin. It should cost us something. And it's an act of worship. You see, this is what the offertory is, an act of worship. And part of the offertory is the offering of our first fruits, and that includes monetary and our own resources.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we often think of that as like the halfway point. Like if you ever go with family, like that's the point where they'll tap you on the shoulder and they'll whisper something to you, or it's the time to kind of chat. But not really, it can be this really beautiful moment, because as we prepare for Christ to give himself to us totally in the Eucharist, we can give ourselves to him in that moment as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that really sort of is a great segue to just another observation. You'll see how that's a pun in a second, is that at every point in the Mass, we are invited to not be an observer. Like we're not meant to just be observing something happening during Mass. You know, the whole gestures of sit, stand, kneel can sometimes lead us to a place where we are just kind of doing it because that's just what we do, or we just start to observe. But sometimes Mass can become that, because that's what I reduce it to. But we're not meant to just kind of merely look at Mass happening there, or sit while Mass happens around us, you know, and just get up at the right times. But we are in the Mass, actually in the Mass and in communion, participating in the Mass. And I love that recalling our early Christian brothers and sisters is actually, this imagery we're talking about is really emphasizing that point to me. And
that it costs us something with our participation. Participation is meant to cost you something.
Yes.
Even it's a verbal response. It costs you something because you want to stay still.
Yeah.
It costs you something to do your Catholic aerobics, your stand, sit, kneeling. It costs you because it involves you, a gesture. But it also costs as well to bring part of your life, not to just to bring what costs you nothing.
Totally. And I think even just thinking about the people who perhaps are the only one in their family to have a faith, and going to Mass can cost you.
Yes.
Or making Sunday Mass a priority can cost you something. You know, whether your family makes comments about it, or they don't fully understand why you have to go to this church thing all the time. Like that act of just turning up to Mass can be this real life, wholehearted sort of sacrifice, but gift to God as well.
Yes, and what a privilege, though, it is for us to be able to go there, to share in that and participate in this Eucharist. You know, even as I was talking about this, we go today in 2022 and we're celebrating the Eucharist, but generations before us have gone, and it's cost them, and generations before that. And the greatest cost was the first Eucharist. You see, where Jesus at the Last Supper, which was he's laying down his life at that point, is saying, I'm committing to die for you, to be poured out for you, to die, to let my blood be poured out and my body be poured out for you. So just as much as it cost Jesus, it has costed every generation. And you talk about the costing of generation. We don't really know. Now I was just, for example, in a parish at the moment, we're building a warehouse. We're going to start celebrating online masses, and as a ministry, we're going to have our own film studio, God willing. And thank you to our ministry partners, thank you to our donors who are making this possible. But I'm going through sort of trying to find like missals, because they're really expensive, like to buy a missal is like $400-500 to get the cloths for the altar. And some things I've found, some things I haven't, but a lot of the things that I've found are from churches that have closed down, like small chapels and other churches that have closed down due to a lack of people. But when I'm looking for these chalices and things, I'm seeing photos. Of people who were digging trenches to build the foundations of these churches, people who laid down everything, invested their own money, gave their own property for the churches to be built in. And it cost them everything to build that community, to build that church. And so that's also part of the Eucharist as well, that place where now it's cost them because it's their life. And because it cost them, they own it in a sense. They own it in their hearts. And they participate with all of their hearts.
And I mean, who are you doing this for? Like you don't give into the point of hurting for just anyone. But ultimately, it's for Jesus Christ, our Savior. I just need to remind myself every minute of every day of the gravity of that. Like there are so many people, and I just even know my parents who have served the church faithfully for so many years, and sometimes in situations where it wasn't appreciated, but they were faithful in that. Why? Not for each other, not because it's a nice thing to do, though it is, but it was for their love of Jesus Christ. That's it.
I was just going to add in there as well that participating in the Eucharist, it's the best thing that the church can do until Jesus comes again, because the Eucharist, it's not merely the presence of the body and blood of Jesus, but it's a formal representation of his death. I always like to imagine, I feel like there's this image when the priest's holding up the host and it's got Jesus crucified above the top of the altar. That's literally what's happening at every Mass. Exactly. And so when we say our mystery of faith, we proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes again. So while we are waiting to see Jesus face to face, we have access to his real presence in the sacrament in the meantime. And that is just an amazing thing.
And that gives us the strength to become the sacrament, to become the Eucharist in the world.
Encounter by FRG Ministry presents our online subscription package. As a member, you will receive digital on-demand access to Encounter's growing library of online courses. Encounter and Encounter Youth online courses cover teaching, devotional and practical elements of the Catholic faith to help individuals, teachers, students and parishes across the world grow in their faith and understanding of the Catholic Church and their relationship with Jesus Christ. Current titles include Knowing Mary, School of Prayer, Introduction to the Bible, the Mass and more, with new courses being added regularly. All Encounter courses include high-definition videos with expert and engaging speakers, testimonies from everyday Catholics, and downloadable content including interactive PDF guides, prayer cards, and wallpapers. These courses are also accredited for professional development for Catholic education staff in Australia. All Encounter Youth courses include teaching videos, interactive student and teacher PDFs with lesson plans, and guided prayer and reflection. For more information about enrolment and subscription options, head to www.encountercourses.com/subscription. Be sure to follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Encounter Courses.
Final reality check of the season.
Ooh.
Speaking of going to Mass, I feel like there's times when you go to Mass and you're on fire, right? Like you're on fire for your faith and you're hanging on to every single word and thing that's happening. But a lot of the time, maybe most of the time, we're kind of distracted and our minds are in all these different places. And so we want to talk about that today, break open this theme of distracted and how we can connect with the Mass a little better.
I even as a priest, I get distracted. But I get distracted, I think, in different ways. Sometimes I see something and I get distracted. And then when I get distracted, then I'm lost because I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, did I pray the consecration? Did I live? And this happens really badly, like when I'm celebrating like 3 or 4 masses in a row, because I'm celebrating the mass and I'm thinking, wait, hold on, did I give the homily or did I give it in the last mass?
That's I can see that happening. That's tricky.
God bless all the priests of the world.
But it usually happens when I'm distracted, like because I'm a human being, we do get distracted. But how can we combat these distractions when we are at Mass? And I think there are certain things that we can do, and we'll talk about this, certain things that we can do to minimize these distractions and to allow us to focus and to get the most out of every Eucharist.
Yeah, and I think we're going to all speak with authority over these practical tips because we can all relate to them. The first way one of the tips I would present would be, when you are going to do a workout, most of the time, you don't just wake up and then go for a 5K run in your pajamas. Like, there's a process that happens beforehand of getting dressed, of warming up so that you're ready to, hit the pavement and go for your run. I think the same goes for Mass, that there's a bit of a warm up before you park your car or rock up to the doors of the church. And I think my parents used to do this when we were kids. Whether it was successful or not all the time, because we were annoying kids, was just whether it's in the car or whether you're walking to Mass or riding to Mass or however you get to Mass, just mentally preparing for Mass by creating silence, creating space to just take a breath, to turn off the radio, to turn off your phone, not call people on your way, but just turn it all off and just stop, pause for a little while and create the space. And then I think in that space, perhaps think about, well, what intentions do I want to bring to Mass? Is there someone I want to pray for? Is there a particular intention I want to offer before the Lord? Or just pray a prayer like, all right, God, I just pray for one thing. What's that one thing that you want me to hear in Mass? And may I not be distracted when you want me to hear it. So that's my tip number 1.
Ooh.
I love that tip. Tip number 2 from me is learn and understand what is actually happening at the Mass. Now, we just heard from one of our sponsors, Encounter Courses, and we have this incredible course called The Mass, where we break open every action, gesture, every prayer. There is meaning behind all of that. And it's really incredible once you kind of start to learn what's going on. And we heard a little bit about that before, about the offertory. It's just amazing. And so if you can take the time to learn about the Mass, it's really going to transform the way that you experience every single time you go to Mass. And a little tip with that, maybe focus on one of those things that you learn each week. Like, I find myself thinking of one thing, maybe what's happening in the opening prayer, and then the next week, the sign of the cross. Like, there's just so much to learn, and it's amazing. So check that out, encountercourses.com/the Mass.
Beautiful. And the third one, I think, connects with Justine's as well, and with Alyssa's. It's about being prepared, especially if you have family. This is a note for families. Okay, families, I have the greatest admiration. You see, we have parishioners that come in with kids, and sometimes 2, sometimes 5, sometimes there's a family with 8 kids, and they're all young kids. And usually the ones with 8 kids are the best behaved. They're better behaved. It's usually the 1 or 2 that find it more difficult. But you see, I can tell as well when somehow families prepare, like they come together, they come with missals, and they come with some toys, not noisy toys like Cooper has now, the squeaky toys, and come prepared. And when we come prepared, then you're able to have less distractions from the kids, and sort of don't need to run after them to take. Now, if they do run away, we have every week I have a child or 2 running towards the sanctuary, or I stand up at to celebrate the Eucharist, and there's a child sitting on my chair. That's fine. There's
Special guest.
Children screaming, welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Your screaming is welcome. Your crying is welcome. Climbing on the chair, that's fine. We're just so grateful you're there. So grateful you got there. So grateful that you made the effort. So, I mean, this is in no way just saying that you need to be more prepared, but more in a sense that if you really want to focus, putting in that sort of even the fact that the kids dress their Sunday best, for they themselves will know that this is something special. This is something extraordinary.
And I don't think that the Sunday best just has to apply to children. Like, sometimes it is worth, a worthy tip for me of just reminding myself externally, like, this is special. This isn't just ordinary. But if I don't have the best clothes or whatever, that also doesn't matter.
Yes.
It's about your disposition of heart.
Exactly.
And sometimes when we can, external reminders are good. I think we can also prepare for Mass by perhaps reading the readings before.
Catholic Influencers podcast.
Cute.
Yay,
Yes.
listen to the
Taking
podcast.
notes in the homily as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'd be intimidated if someone pulled up some notes and started
Just on your
writing.
phone.
Yeah. Stop playing with your phone.
Yeah, a feathered ink pen, and then just taking notes.
With a
Even
scroll.
reading along,
Yeah.
reading along with the readings. Like there's a great app, Universalist, that I like to use. I always get the looks from the older generation, thinking I'm texting, but no, I'm actually reading along because it sinks in my head better
Yes.
if I can read the words at the same
So
time.
following along with a missal with Universalist, the app as well, that's so important. Can I suggest one more thing as well. Try and go to Mass occasionally during the week, not instead of Sunday, but in addition to Sunday, because that gives you another and new experience of the Mass. The audience, the demographic there is different. The audience is different. The way people respond to prayers is different. And even the whole feeling of a Mass is like you're looking at the Mass from a whole new perspective, which is a beautiful perspective. Definitely worth looking at.
I was going to add one more thing. I think we can do all of these things. We can go to that daily Mass, read the readings beforehand, know the Mass, all these things, but we can still be distracted and not to be discouraged about that. I found this really great quote that I think sums it up really well. It's by St. Francis de Sales, and it says this: "If the heart wanders or is distracted, bring it back to the point quite gently and replace it tenderly in its master's presence. And even if you did nothing during the whole of your hour, but bring your heart back and place it again in our Lord's presence, though it went away every time you brought it back, your hour would be very well employed." So when you have those distractions, acknowledge them, but bring your mind back to God's presence.
That's beautiful, yeah. And so this is beautiful tips as well, which we can use to draw us closer to the Lord in the Mass. And we will get distracted, don't worry. Be easy, sort of, in a sense, don't be so hard on yourself. But just come back to focus, as we just heard in that quote. So we've reached the end of our podcast, is that right? So the end of our season, the end of season
It's a bit sad.
7. It
End
is a
of
bit
season
sad.
7. It's been so great, guys.
It's just been such a privilege, I think, as each episode, as we've recorded each episode, and as the season has unfolded, and as we've heard stories of people who we've journeyed with. I'm just reminded time again what an absolute privilege it is to be seated here and to be journeying not just with the two of you, but with every single person listening, whether you're a first timer here or you've listened to every episode. We feel like family, and it's such a privilege to walk this journey towards Jesus together.
Amen. You've summed it up perfectly well.
And it has been, it's always, and for me, one of the things that I am privileged to is to be able to share this podcast with two women as well. And the reason I say this is because very often I'm a big believer that we need to hear the voice of women, the prophetic voice of women in the church. And sometimes we as a church tend to make the gentleman's voices much louder, and so it's been a beautiful privilege as well to listen to God speak through you through this podcast.
We have exciting things. We're not going anywhere. We're having a little bit of a break, but we have some exciting things which we'll tell you about very soon.
Yes, and there are two, I think, exciting things that are happening for the next episode. One is we are moving to our new studio. So we are in the process of moving into a new film studio where we won't have a dog playing with squeaky toys. So we'll move into this place. This is the place where we'll be filming our Sunday Masses. Also check out, if you haven't seen our Sunday Masses, frgministry.com/mass. But also we'll be filming our online courses. And Josh, who's here behind the camera, this will be his playground as well, where he will be able to work more efficiently and provide a lot of content for you. But here's another exciting thing, is that we have been acquired
Yeah,
Sounds very formal.
by a huge publishing company called OSV, Our Sunday Visitors. They are one of the biggest publishing companies in the United States, and they are going to be. Nothing will change for us, but they will. I think they're going to raise us up on a platform and take us to a wider audience. They might add a few ads here and there, we won't, not more than we already have, but they also will be part of this journey with us, and we're so grateful that they believe in what we're doing, and we're excited as well to journey in season 8 with OSV.
It's going to be amazing, but we're not leaving you empty-handed with content. We will be having a little bit of a break, but we do encourage you to check out the Catholic Influencers Summit, which is this huge online conference we have been very busy putting together for you. The 3 of us are going to be there. We have some incredible keynote speakers from all around the world. Archbishop Charles Shikluna from Malta, Emily Wilson from USA. We have Rico Ariafano from Indonesia. Another keynote speaker, you, father of.
Myself, yeah.
But seriously,
and
so
this
awesome.
worship, we have Alyssa as well leading the music, the worship, and
Sarah Kroger from the USA. Who,
No
oh my
way.
God, I know, right?
Actually, to be honest, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
It's so cool. And some wonderful speakers and presenters doing some workshops, great topics. The theme is holiness in the 21st century. So there's so much content, so much for you to learn, so many ways for you to grow in your faith. It's a free event. Head to catholicinfluencersummit.org for all the info. It's happening July 21 to July 23.
And so please don't miss out. We're blessed to have you. Again, also thank you to our sponsor as well, Modern Grace. If you like to some cool content as well, what do they sell? They sell like bracelets, they sell books.
They sell great Catholic content. It's kind of cool Catholic content.
So, yes.
Not content, what's the word?
Merchandise.
Merchandise. And
so moderngrace.com.au as well. So thank you once again for joining us. God bless you. And please do stay in touch. Go to frgministry.com/podcast. God bless you.
Bye.